Arjun. I'm the host of the Fully Remote Talkshow. We are on episode 8, how remote leaders should handle employee isolation. Again, isolation is a heavy topic again for a Wednesday evening, but we talked about connectedness last week, and this seems like it's like the other side of the same coin. And we've all faced some form of isolation in the last couple of years, at least for people who are working from home. There is the whole idea of like feeling that like nobody gets me, or that low energy feeling of feeling bored, but at the same time like the high energy feeling of feeling anxious is happening at the same time. All these are to like somehow related to like feeling lonely, isolated from the rest of the workforce. And we feel that this is one of the biggest downsides of working from home. But with all this and being a heavy topic, I am still upbeat that we have among us an expert. And so we have David over here, who is an expert. He is an organizational psychologist. He's an entrepreneur, and he has advised several startups. He, as of recently, has gone to a HR Tech conference, which actually has talked a lot about this topic. And I'm very, very excited to have you here, David, and looking forward to talking to you about this topic.
Well, Arjun, thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Perfect. We have tons of questions for you, but before I kind of jump to that, we do this checking in with the folks that are over here. This is a tradition that we're doing over here, where if you could meet one person, alive or dead, who would it be? Go ahead and take a moment to think about that and enter your answer in that green box over there and type enter. There are multiple people, feel free to do this. Again, an opportunity for us to bring back our thinking self, check in with ourselves, come back and think for a moment, because what we really like about this talk show is that it's usually very interactive. People who are coming over here participate, have a lot to talk about, and this is an opportunity for everybody to tune in that thinking brain and come in over there. I'll give another 10 seconds for you to think about one person, alive or dead, and who would it be. In a minute, we will see what everybody else has typed. This is anonymous. You don't have to worry about you putting in that answer that nobody else is going to appreciate. In fact, the more funny, the better. Hey, Hendra, welcome to the show. We are just checking in with everybody coming in. If you could meet one person, alive or dead, who would it be? And type your answer over there. And in about 5 seconds, I'm going to look at what everybody else has said. There you go. Conan O'Brien, Albert Einstein, Yamamoto, Carl Jung, Gandhi, Napoleon, Tesla, Richard Branson, Satoshi Nakamoto. There you go. I think outside of Yamamoto, I know all of these people, which is itself a great sign for me. Very, very interesting, and a very wide variety of people, largely leaders, and this is great. I was thinking if I could bring any of these people as a guest for the talk show next time, but it looks like it's out of my range at this point of time. But let's keep a note of this for some future episodes. But with that, folks, I'm gonna jump in and start this conversation with David again. Great to have you on the show. I'm going to ask you questions over here, but if anybody else has questions, feel free to press that raise hand button and we can bring you up on stage and have you ask a question directly to David. So David, with that, I want to start off with asking you, so isolation, is this being associated with work from home when there is more to do with this, and this pandemic more to blame for this as well? And just paint me the picture of what is the history of this isolation and work from home.
Yeah, I mean, I think isolation's always been around, and if you were working remotely prior to the pandemic, you may or may not have felt isolation because you were able to be social, right? And you were able to meet people at home, you can go out, you just may not have met as many people at work, and work may have invited you to come visit the office if it was in another city or what have you. But we kind of went through a very unique period where all of a sudden everyone was not only forced to work remotely, but also forced not to socialize. And so it was kind of like a double whammy for a very long time. And, I think that isolation happens with remote work when you don't have any kind of opportunities for unplanned interactions. And that's, I think, what's driving a lot of this. So, it was the fact that everyone was not only just working remotely, but as a result of working remotely, every interaction that you have is typically scheduled and doesn't really allow for a lot of the unplanned interactions. And we have there's a purpose for connection, and having an opportunity to just chat with someone in some way gives yourself a break, right? It makes you feel better. Maybe they make you feel better. Maybe they tell you a joke, or they tell you a good story, or they share some good news, or maybe they make you feel better by asking you for some help, and you're like, oh yeah, it's right there, and you're wanting to help them, but you don't want to put another meeting on your calendar, right? So
Right.
I think that it is definitely exasperating. The pandemic plus remote work is kind of a double whammy, if you might say,
Right.
in impacting how people are feeling.
This is good. I mean, I think this almost seems like it's kind of good news for remote work people, as to say that there is hope for things to change once the pandemic gets over. And so there is that thing to look forward to for sure. And also, like, just looking at the individual, right? Like, not at the organization level, but like as a person, what is this effect of this isolation, and like why should like somebody care about it? And because work from home is new for a lot of these people,
Right.
should we just like take this as another thing that we got to get used to, or is this something that is worth battling for and like acting against?
Well, I think the way to look at it is like the cure for isolation is to not be alone, right?
Right.
And so, how do you do that when uh, you may not be in a position to be with other people, right? So there could be individuals on a team that have compromised, people at home or themselves, or they just physically are not emotionally ready yet to be back in the office. So, I think the challenge is like, how do you cure that, right? In today's world, and I think that it will, for the most part, people are starting to interact. Like, restaurants are busy, airplanes are full, people aren't going on business trips. I just came back from this conference. Like, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of people there, and that, I think, was feeding a lot of people's souls. So I think that's one way to combat it.
Got it.
You know?
And I think you kind of touched upon this, right? Like, different, I mean, isolation is not an equal opportunity attacker, right? Like, different people have different ways that this affect them, like specifically like the younger people versus the older people, or like women versus men, or like the different personality types, which comes up all the way. Like, it's like, as an introvert, this is great, or as an
Right.
extrovert, this is great. And so is there what I mean, like, can you tell me more about that?
In what way? Like, how are personal differences impacting? Like, how are people responding differently to isolation? I mean, I think it really
Yeah.
depends. Like, there's
Yeah, what kind of different parameters that we should look at? Like, age is one, gender is one, then obviously like the personality type is one, but like, are there other things that it's affecting disproportionately?
well, I mean, in the specific context of what's happened in our world over the last 2 years, how you're reacting to like wanting to be in the office or not being in the office, like, I think it's not just related to like whether you're an introvert or you're extrovert. Like, and introverts also need to interact. They just need to interact less. But when that interaction is zero in person, right? When everything's kind of a Zoom or a Zinc meeting back to back, right? Like, there's something you still crave, right? So like, introverts and extroverts, they're like two sides. It's a spectrum, and in the middle are ambiverts. So yes, the more extroverted person who's forced to work remotely may seek out more opportunities to connect with other people, and the introverted person may not. And how that ends up really depends on the role that they're in as well, right? And also, the other piece of this is like where you are in your career, regardless of your personality, right?
Got it.
My
Yeah.
camera just went off, but I think is that.
Not sure what happened over there. Might be adjusting to do with the internet connectivity over there.
Okay. All right. Let's see what I could do here. close. Hold on one second. This makes a difference here. Yeah, I don't have much else open.
Let's see.
I'm weary to change
while
the network I'm on. Yeah, but I'm happy to continue talking here. Now, let me know what you want me to do.
Maybe one thing is like while we are waiting, I think like there is like an internet connectivity thing or something to do with the camera over there. Maybe it might help to just refresh the page and see if that makes things better while you come back over here. But while David is fixing this, this was going to be one of the questions that I was going to ask for the rest of us is, how are we doing? Like, it's like the question that I have for David is more about, as individuals, how empowered are we to solve this for ourselves? Like, what kind of actionable steps that we can take to solve this isolation for ourselves? And I want to kind of open it up for the rest of the folks here to ask, just answer over here. So if you have an idea of like what you have done to battle isolation, feel free to type it over there, and we can see those cards like piling up on like what ideas that you have used. But I know, Hendra, you had a question and you lifted your hand, but before I could bring you up, David had to step out, but I'll definitely like bring you back up once David is here. But feel free to type your thoughts on that, and we can see what ideas come up over here. Intentionally have conversations regarding life, desire, work related things. Forcing me to go out more. That's definitely there. One thing that I did was...
Hey, I'm here. On my
Okay,
phone.
You're on your phone. Okay, that usually
better?
doesn't.
It doesn't really help.
I can see you right now, but like the phone is not like the best experience for this. But let me see if we can make that work.
All right, and let me try. I can try one more time. The refresh didn't work. Hold on. Sorry, guys.
No worries. We are over here brainstorming and thinking about, or more or less reflecting and thinking about like what other folks have done to battle isolation. So in your absence, we are collecting different opinions about what people have done.
Perfect. It might be my setup on my computer. So I'm gonna just disconnect from the second screen, see if that helps.
Yeah, for sure. In the meanwhile, if anyone has a specific idea that they've done, again, right, like there is two ways that we can think about it as leaders, as ourselves, as to how we have done this for our company, but also like individually, what did you do? This could be like the smaller things, like I stepped out and went for a walk, be more with nature, or whatever it is. I'm looking for those kind of tips as well, because I think what I realize is like the small things make big differences when it comes to like loneliness and isolation. So looking forward to hearing all the tips here. Personal questions to the person better. I think intentionally have conversations regarding life. Yeah. Point to be outdoors for some time every day. Looks like David's still having the problem. In the meanwhile, like Hendra, do you want to ask your questions, and then we can probably like have a discussion internally among us while we are waiting for David, and then once David comes up, we can ask him for his opinion on that.
Sure. My question is like, so how can you identify like people that kind of isolated, like having this kind of problem just ahead of time? Maybe there's some, signal that, for us to, this person have like this kind of isolation problem.
This is great. This is literally, you've taken one of my questions that I have, and like, this is perfect. This is it. This is what I was going to ask. You're back, David.
All right.
Welcome back.
I'm on dial-up. No, I'm just kidding. I switched networks. I think that might be the issue. I'm just on a different setup with my computer, so camera's not as great, but I'm here.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. So welcome back. And I think
Thank you.
what we were doing in your absence is like sort of crowdsourcing on what tips that people have that they have successfully done to battle isolation. And we've got some good ideas over here. And Hendra had a question for you. So I'm just going to go back to like the question and answer mode over here. And Hendra's question, Hendra, do you mind like probably raising hand again and like asking that question? I think it's a very important one, and I want it to be you to ask it.
Oh, hi, David.
Can you?
So I have a question. Like, how do you identify like people or coworker that have like isolation problem? Sometimes it's just like, yeah.
No, that's a great question. I think there's no like hard science to it. I mean, you can find like how isolated are you feeling and a scale that you would ask people, but you would just kind of get a sense of like, an isolated person is someone that's not meeting with other people, may not be engaging in Slack, may not be responding in in email threads or what have you, in ways that are just like the ways you would if you were like connecting with people and feeling like you're part of a team, right? And so it manifests itself in different people in different ways. And so I think the challenge for managers is to kind of like, how do you empathize with people that are feeling isolated, right? And I think the number one way is just, it's not a absolute thing, it's a relative thing. So if someone's behavior changes, you want to be attuned to how it's changing. It's not like all of a sudden isolation is equal to responding to 3 or fewer Slack messages a day. Like that's not isolation, right? But if that person typically is super active and all of a sudden changes, then that becomes, I think, kind of a tipping point or an indication.
Great question. Thanks, Hendra, for bringing that up. And again, we've had like several practical suggestions over even like the previous episodes over here about like, it's like, hey, what can we do? Like this happy hour every Friday, or like an open talk conversation session, or like spend every 5 minutes talking to people. And these are all great tips. And like, I feel like many of these have worked. Do you have tips like this of your own, or do you, from your background, know of what has worked? Is there like any, I'm not asking for a silver bullet, but like what is guaranteed to move the needle?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think you have to try different things, and every company is a little different. I think the key things are, as a manager, you want to take an individualized approach, right? It's not a one size fits all, and really you want to meet people where they are, right? And so if that means going to coffee with someone who feels comfortable going to coffee, or just having a one-on-one on a phone call with someone because they're not feeling comfortable coming into the office, like that's kind of how you have to kind of approach that. And the other key thing is listening, right? And one of the things that really took off during the pandemic were employee listening programs. So employee engagement surveys, pulse surveys, online focus groups, analyzing, different sources of data to identify potential groups or individuals that might be at risk of isolation. And are kind of some of the higher level kind of methodologies or approaches companies are taking. The Zoom happy hour could be fun. I mean, there's a lot that happens with those. I think that they had a spike in popularity in the beginning, but then it's not just about getting together and making craft cocktails. It's like having a intentional conversation about something that brings you closer together in a way that's both personal and professional.
Got it. Are there, I mean, I think this seems like suddenly for a manager is already, like thinking about like the team and leadership and everything, but like now you've added like a little bit more responsibilities to like watch out for isolation and everything. What kind of, I mean, are there like training or like what else is being done to like empower leaders to be better at doing this?
Right. Yeah, I think it goes back to like, it's all about the manager, right? And you say people join or leave companies because of the manager. And I think you have to have kind of a point of view of putting
when you put someone into the managerial role, it's not just about what their performance was like as an individual contributor, but also what's the people side of it, right? Do they have the capacity and the skill to be able to connect with people, read the room, have one-on-one conversations, empathize, but also be reflective to them, have good listening skills, and be able to, just kind of handle all the non-tactical aspects of being a manager. So there's some research that I saw, that like in 2020, managers kind of really brought their A game in terms of all the things they're supposed to do around accountability and guidance and autonomy, right? Um, Managers are tired. And so in 2021, their behaviors kind of dropped back to their pre-2020 and 2019 levels. So I think there's definitely a need to, keep an eye out on how managers are doing and to support them in ways so that they can, be there for their teams.
Got it. Okay, so sort of, I mean, we're coming more closer to the end over here, and so sort of zooming out, right? Like, I think a lot of what we've spoken is at like the manager and the individual level over here. But if you look at like an organizational leader, like a founder of a company, like hundreds of people, you know, why should a company care about this? I mean, since obviously like the employee wellness is important,
Right.
but like where do they start seeing this? Is this a productivity drop, burnout? Like, is this attrition? Like, what kind of signals do they
Yeah.
have to like watch out for?
Yeah, well, it's all. I mean, they're all interrelated, right? And it's not like if you move the needle on isolation, this amount you will see 10 fewer people leave or 5 fewer people leave. They all kind of fit into kind of this like multi-variable model, right? And on the personal side, right? If you're isolation and mental health, right? Like, it's a hard thing to deal with, and if someone falls into depression or has a higher kind of stress and anxiety disorder, happening, then it's not good for the person. It's not good for the individual, just at a human level, right? And then on the professional level, right? Like, isolation can lead to being disengaged, and if a key person on your team is feeling less and less connected to the rest of the team, then that team could suffer in multiple ways. They have one less kind of person contributing in a meaningful way, right? That isolation and disengagement could be contagious if that person is very vocal about it. So now it can spread, right? Engagement is kind of the top key driver. Like, engage people, stay longer, right? And in today's labor market and today's world and the Great Resignation, it's not surprising that we have the Great Resignation, because we've taken out of the equation one of the key things that keeps people together. That's a sense of belonging, right? We've made it a lot harder for people to have connection points at work with remote work that doesn't kind of require another 30-minute event of some sort, right? And as a result, people are leaving. Glint did a study and found that being disconnected from your colleagues is the #1 driver of burnout. And McKinsey showed us that a lack of belonging, a sense of belonging, is one of the top reasons why employees are leaving our company today. So I think those are kind of the downstream implications of not addressing isolation, but no pun intended, you don't want to address isolation on its own in isolation, right? Like, you want to look at a much holistic picture and see what else is driving why people are engaged or not engaged, and what do they want at different stages of their career. So like this kind of meet people where they are is another theme around, understanding the different segments of your workforce, especially as companies grow, into the thousands or tens of thousands of employees.
Super cool. Seems like it's like a serious enough problem that people should be paying attention. And I think you already hinted at like a couple of things that organizations are doing, like these pulse surveys that they're doing, and like getting like the pulse of the entire things. Are there any other processes that are being put into place that seem like it's effective in like the whole spectrum of these, right? Like the engagement, belonging, loneliness, isolation, like, and making sure people get that sense. What are other processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, there's processes and I think there's constructs too. And I think one of the things that people have been bringing up over and over again is how important psychological safety is in today's new normal of work. And I think we're starting to see a lot more kind of awareness and training around that. The notion of safety is like, bringing your whole person to work, right? So you can be who you are, but that kind of translates in certain ways. Like you could be who you are in a meeting, but also speak your mind in a meeting, right? It's like the opposite of groupthink, where everyone just decides and then because no one feels comfortable pushing. Hybrid work poses some really interesting challenges to fostering psychological safety, because now you have I would say class system, but you have two different segments of the workforce: people that are in person and can read each other a little bit better in a meeting, or have a sidebar after the meeting, or have an organic conversation. And then people who are who are working remotely and might be participating in a meeting remotely and coming in, on other days. And just the notion of saying, we really missed you when the rest of us were in the office. That's not necessarily the best thing to say, because now it implies it's not okay for me to not be in the office, right? Or what did I miss? Like, did I miss something important? And there's going to be some kind of thinking around like what's the best way to address this. So I think we'll start to see a proliferation of like training and development programs focused, on these constructs of empathy and listening and fostering psychological safety. I think those are all things that'll kind of continue to pick up in the next few years, or even the next several months too.
This is great. I mean, I can keep talking about this, but we are closer to the end of this. Before we actually like wrap up, I had like sort of one more prediction of some sort. Again, right? Like this is not entirely about isolation, but related to that is like in general, like the prediction on the future of work over here, right? Is the future of work remote? And again, this is something that is broader, but in the context of what we're talking about, will the sense of isolation and burnout and like not belonging from working from home, will that affect this future of a remote first world? I want to ask obviously David's opinion on this, but before I get a chance, like I would love to hear from all of you as well as to like what you think about this. And click on the answer on the right and hit submit, and so we can see the results. And I'm gonna wait for a few more seconds before I do that. Before we can hear David's thought on this, we have 4 more people to vote over here. There you go. I think we're good. And so, David, would you cast your vote there, and like, what would you say it is?
On these 4, I have to choose one of these 4, right? I can't come up with my own.
No, yeah. I mean, you for the purpose of this activity, come up with these.
I would say that it's probably going to be the third choice. Yes, solutions will emerge to solve for isolation. And I can expand on that more, but I'll let you. Should I choose that here?
Let's see. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, okay. Looks like that's the popular choice. Not very surprising. We're all a very optimistic, hopeful bunch over here, but would love to hear you double click on that.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to double click on that a little bit more, I think the future of work will be what it will be. And the way I kind of look at that is it's a market. And, the last 2 years, from kind of forces outside of both labor and the employees and the employers' hands, we all were forced into remote work. And the supply labor, right, workers said, I like this. I'm saving time, right? Like, okay, it's safe to go back, but like, I don't want to commute for 2 hours. I don't want to, and I can move to another part of town or another part of the city and another part of the country and save some money. Or even if you reduce my salary, I'm still doing better, because of the cost of living. And I think what we'll start to see, and we're starting to see this, I think there are a couple of references to Google at this conference I was at. They're going to bring back massages. They're going to bring back big lunches, and they're going to create demand for people to come back to the office. So you're going to start to see kind of investments in that experience some more. I think it poses some challenges, like, okay, startup, a seed stage startup or an A round startup, they're not going to have massages. I mean, but they will take into consideration what the experience is. And the other is like, around the decision of how much remote versus in-person work should there be, will be driven. I think there needs to be a shift from a percentage of saying, okay, 10%, 20%, 40%, whatever it is, number of days. So instead of like duration or percentage based, make the in-person decision based on the activity that you're doing. Right. And say, yes, we all need to be, in person, not 2 days a week, but for every time we're doing a planning meeting or a retro, or we're doing some, creative brainstorming work, we should be in the office and let that drive that in terms of the future. So yeah, that's kind of my prediction.
This is great. Yeah, I think we will obviously hope for a world where like the solutions come for solve for it, but like there is a lot more nuances to this. I think this is mostly the end of this show, but like in case if we take one more question from somebody else, I've been asking all the questions. But if nobody has a question, one sort of reverse question that I would typically ask is like, hey, what did we not ask, and like what should we be asking over here to you? And like if you have to say something, what would you say?
Yeah, no, great question. I think you covered a lot of the bases, Arjun. Like I think that from a tactical level, like it's there isn't a silver bullet, as you said, and it really is taking an individualized approach and knowing the people that you're working with as a manager, so you can kind of get a sense of where they are, and then you meet them there to help them. And if you can't help them, and hopefully your company has resources or can point them into a direction that they can't get help.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, David. This was a pleasure to have you again. Like it was great having everybody over here. This is kind of usually the place where I thank David for his time over here, and I stop the recording, but I continue to have this space for another 5-10 minutes in case if people want to like stay back and chat.